Greetings to you all. We have joined us for this policy dialogue forum, a special policy dialogue forum. And as SAPIS, we are pleased to be co-hosting with the rest of the Zimbabwe civic society, the main of which are the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum, Zim Rights, Zim Code, MACRAD, Zimbabwe Peace Project, Citizens Manifesto, and the Center for Natural Resource Governance, CNRG, the director of whom is our moderator this evening, Farai Magu, who has been central in this initiative, which has caused us to cancel, postpone other topics because of the urgency of this matter, the Chilonga issue. As the title indicates, Chilonga, another displacement in pursuit of corruption, question mark. This is the discussion that we have before us. But before I hand over to the moderator, Farai Magu, is simply to thank you, Farai, and all of you from the various organizations, some of whom I have mentioned, for choosing us to partner with yourselves. We feel very honored, and we want to be party to this initiative to raise awareness, to raise alarm, to raise the stakes against what is clearly a very dangerous situation. Not the first, but certainly significant in its import. So Farai, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mandaza, for creating the space for us to debate this very important topic in the development of our country. Lately, we have witnessed a rise in development-induced displacement of people from their ancestral homes. The scourge began with Morowa Diamonds, which displaced a couple of hundred families in the 90s. But it was a little bit more orderly than what we were to witness a decade later in Marange around 2009, when the government invoked the Communal Lands Act and pushed about 1,300 families out of their lands at gunpoint. And they were moved to a farm, which is about 80 kilometers north of Marange, where they are living in squalid poverty, completely abandoned. It's not clear who is the responsibility for this community, but the government blames the companies and the companies blame the government. But the reality is that the people are suffering. We have other places like in Mount Darwin, where people are also being threatened with eviction because Lafarge Cement wants to take over their land for limestone quarrying. I'm just coming from Wange, where there are two communities which are so being forced out of their land to pave way for copper mining and coal mining. And today we are gathered to look at yet another case which has drawn the attention of the nation, the Chilonga case in Chiredzi, where on the 26th of February, government issued a Statutory Instrument 50 of 2021, ordering about 12,500 people to pack with all their belongings immediately. Again, they invoked the Communal Lands Act. Civil society gathered together as a coalition to build a campaign, Save Chilonga Community. And we have a number of organizations which Dr. Mandaza has already alluded to. Hence, we are here to hear from various experts on what has been happening in Zimbabwe. And the first to give us an insight is the director of Masvingo Research and Advocacy, a Center for Research, Advocacy and Development, MACRAD, Mr. Ephraim Mtombeni, who has been in the front line for a while, investigating and reporting on the developments in Chilonga. We are also going to have to hear from Janet Zhou, the director of Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZimCOD, who is also going to speak about business and human rights, what the Chilonga case means to the concept of business and human rights. We're also going to hear what the law say from Professor Lovemore Maduku. Is the government within its power to simply wake up and tell people to pack their belongings and go? Go where? We don't know. So Professor Maduku is going to give us a constitutional view of the developments in Chilonga. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to leave this time to Comrade Ephraim Mtombeni of Makrad to give us background on how this issue has been evolving until now, where the whole country is aware of what is happening in Chilonga. Over to you, Ephraim.
Thank you, Comrade Farai, and thank you everyone for participating in this dialogue, and thank you everyone for amplifying the voice of the marginalized people in Chilonga. Without wasting your time, I just need to comment by giving a brief summary, background of the issue at hand, and goes on to outline the possible socio-economic vulnerabilities to be experienced by the Shangaan people after the unplanned and forceful dispossession of their land by the government. I also look on the Shangaan people's projected loss of livelihood, cultural practice and identity, social capital, heritage sites, and infringement of their land tenure and access rights to land. Giving a historical background of the Shangaan people in Chiredzi. In Zimbabwe, the population says that the minority groups comprising of Shangaan, Tsonga, Nam, and Kalanga are less than 10% of the total Zimbabwean population. The numerical inferiority makes them more vulnerable to government-initiated eviction and land dispossession. The Shangaan primarily survive on natural resources, and over the years, they have generated strong cultural, spiritual, and physical links to hence their well-being and livelihood. Through their long stay, they have also mastered strategic and pragmatic ways of surviving, even during times of threats from unknown and known disasters. The newly developed cosmological indigenous knowledge is praised as the bedrock of their livelihoods. Unfortunately, the Shangaan knowledge and contribution to national development is usually vilified. The Shangaan people who live in the southern eastern parts of Chiredzi have been and are still vulnerable to government-induced forced displacement. The government proposed in the 2020 displacements among the Shangaan is not unique. Instead, they have been displaced long back ago, even in the colonial era. In the 1960s, hundreds of households in Chilonga were left homeless by the colonial government. It is agreed that the local people were uprooted from their ancestral land to pay for the development of the National Gonarenzo National Park. And also after that, they were also displaced to pave way for sugarcane plantation, Tonga to Ules. After the fast track land reform of 2000, the Chita people in Chilonga went back to the government trying to reclaiming their ancestral land. But unfortunately, they were being evicted again since they were seen as intruders in the Gonarenzo National Park. So these movements, yes, that's open conflicts and truce between the local people and the national park and the government. So that is the historical background of the people whom are being now try to be displaced by the government. Let's take a look on the government's proposed eviction, which took place in April. In April 2020. On April 30, the Minister of Local Government, Public Works and National Housing, Honorable Julaimon, who was acting on behalf of the Minister of Lands, Agriculture and Rural Settlement, the late Prince Shir, by then, convened a meeting in Chiredzi. That meeting, we know that even the private media houses were banned from that meeting. And in the meeting, there was the presence of Chief Sengwe, Member of Parliament for Chiredzi South Constituency, Chiredzi District Administrator, Chiredzi District Education Officer, Edmund Chilonga, and Edmund Maswameli, and the minister's delegation, and few stakeholders, including the ruling part were also present in that meeting. And at the meeting, the minister indicated that the government had identified about 6,500 hectares of land in Chiredzi. And he added that a private company generated an interest in growing Lucerne grass in the identified area. And the area covers part of Chiredzi East and Chiredzi South constituents. And on the meeting, on his opening remarks, Provincial District Coordinator Mr. Mbeza highlighted that the government intended to evict 678 villagers with 2,258 households to make 13,840 people in Chilonga, Gwaseche, and Chibwedziva. Then from there, that was the first meeting happened in Chiredzi. Then from there, on 18 of May, the Chiredzi Rural District Council, Mr. Edward Matsilele, called for a meeting in Chilonga with 30 local leaders to discuss the issues concerning the proposed eviction. And on that meeting, the people in Chilonga mobilized in their numbers. They did not went as 30 as the CEO per instruction, to an extent that the meeting was abandoned after Edmund Chilonga started to speak and villagers started to protest. And the other reason why the community abandoned the meeting was that the district development coordinator alluded that the proposed eviction was in the plan since 1964, which not went well with the people. And the agenda of the meeting directly showed that the government and the local people are at loggerheads concerning the proposed eviction. And since then, there was a lot of fast-growing mistrust by the local people and the government. That's where the only by the local authorities in Chilonga. Then from there, nothing else was being communicated. It was only the instrument which later came this year. All the people in Chilonga were in darkness after those two meetings. Parents Shiri and Vice President Chiwenga visited the area in June, and a lot of people protested on that meeting, and CIOs and police managed to arrest even 6 members of the community which tried to protest during the visit of the Vice President and the late Parents Shiri. So that was the situation in Chilonga. That was the only communication between the government and the local people in Chilonga by then. So I also need to take on the social economic implication of the forced displacement among the communities. The forced displacement planned by the government projected to cause a lot of untold suffering amongst poor, resourced, and vulnerable Shangani people. The commonly cited challenges are to emerge from the loss of livelihood, social capital, cultural identity, and heritage sites. Unfortunately, the displaced people have low adaptivity capacity in responding to the government-induced eviction. Painfully, the Shangaan communities were never consulted or never involved in the process related to their ancestral land and the looming eviction. If the proposed eviction continued as planned, they will plug into a lot of suffering and they will never be able to recover during their lifestyle. So, number one, the loss of agro-based economic livelihood in Chilonga as these people were depending on farming, on mixed farming of crops and livestock production. In some instances, they also survive on fishing. The Shangaan people fear that the arbitrary eviction to be executed by the government will greatly disturb their linking capital, which is at the center of economic fortunes. Their linking capital comes from 2 organizations, namely delta beverages, and the national parks wildlife management. The delta beverages, they've managed to contract local farmers in growing sorghum through a scheme referred to as the beverage sorghum contract farming scheme. Through this scheme, farmers are given sorghum seeds and fertilizer. In return, communities sell the sorghum to Delta. We use it to brew local alcoholic beverages. Secondly, the Zimbabwe National Park and Wildlife Management Authority support the local people in sailor fishing through the provision of food and fuel to the fishermen. Therefore, uprooting the Shangaan from their tribal lands will cut links with their local institutions who have been helping them. More so, there are great loss of disposal income due to disruption of their world mastered economic livelihood. Also, there is a fear of to lose of basic amenities. That was the major concern of the Shangaan communities. They lamented whether the government will provide them adequate school, clinics, hospitals, roads, and other critical infrastructure after relocation. Greatest worries were strengthened by example of their predecessors. To take a look on the Tugwim Kosi Dam project, the green fuel ethanol plant in Chisombanje, the relationship within the investor and the community is sour. Recently in Chisombanje, if your livestock enter into the investor's area, you are required to pay a fine of $5 USD. Failing to do that, your livestock will be transported to Mwenezi to feed crocodiles owned by the same investor. So that is the fear we have as an institution, and also the Shangaan speaking communities. If the government will provide them adequate basic amenities, as we know that where they are staying, there are few schools, few health centers, and absence of critical infrastructure. So relocating the Shangaan communities, is the government able to provide all these basic amenities? So the eviction will also destroy the cultural identity and heritage loss of the communities, especially villagers in Chilonga, in Maswameli areas, are going to lose their ancestral land, which they have inherited through their generation. Through time, they have developed a relationship with the environment, and leaving it will be disastrous to their livestock and well-being. Losing contact with their tribal land will therefore distance themselves from their ancestral graves, mountains, pools, other cultural, religious, and spiritual sites. The commonly feared sacred ritual sites to be lost include, but not limited to, the Mapumu Hill and the Nzela, among others, which the Shangani people might lose. And also, they also practice the scared rain making ceremonies. Performing rain ceremonies is critical as part of worshiping ancestors for them. So that's the fear that the Shangaan, these communities will lose their cultural identity and heritage loss. Also, the Shangaan communities are going to lose of traditional dances and rituals. These people are rich in these traditional dances and rituals. The eviction will destroy their social capital and networking, which is critical in sustaining traditional dances such as Chinyambele, Chokoto, Marula, among other dances. So the relocation will directly alter their music instruments and their dancing type. And there is also a fear to the dilute of their rituals of passage for Shangaan boys and girls, the boys' rituals like woko, the circumcision, which they done in ritual use, the womanhood, the girls are also initiated into womanhood through Eskomba. In these rituals, girls are taught about womanhood, cultural practice, and traditional dances. So this eviction will negatively affect their cultural identity and general well-being as Shangani people. And as I mentioned about the Shangaan people, that they are also rich in indigenous knowledge system. So the proposed eviction, it means that they are going to lose that indigenous knowledge system. The vulnerable communities, the social groups, have been great fear for loss of their traditional harness indigenous knowledge systems through contact with their environment. To be relocated and resettled in a new and distant places with different environmental and characteristics will plug them into chaos in relationship to coping and adapting to new conditions. So to government, there is absence of political will by the government in respecting the minority social groups, in driving them to ignore the cause of sustainable development goals, human rights, the constitution, our constitution itself, as the government should respect the sustainable development goals. The #1 goal, not poverty, zero hunger, reduced inequalities, peace and justice. We've seen that the government is ignoring these goals, and the government is continue trying to push the Shangaan people to the periphery of the country where there are absence of the basic amenities. So I will try to go fast on the community concerns. What are the communities? What are the community says about the eviction? So the affected community feel that the government is now betraying them by grabbing the little that they have left with. As I mentioned, that these people were being evicted before to pave way for the sugarcane plantation, to pave way for the Gonarenzo National Park. So now, currently, the communities feel that the government is now betraying them. The war veterans argue that it is the colonial government that sparked the Chimurenga War, which later gave birth to an independent Zimbabwe. The villagers argue that the land reform program in 2000 allowed the Shangaan people to regain some of their remaining ancestral land. But currently now, the government is proposing to evict them to a place where they don't know, to a place where they are not aware of, without proper compensation, without proper procedures being taken. So the Shangaan community, to some extent, feel that there is tribalism at play. The majority hold that they view that the Shangaan are being discriminated by others who are dominant in top management position. It might be an insult to say that, but these are the views from the communities, that they feel that tribalism is at play, as it is the fourth eviction which took place in their time. And also the Shangaan people have fear that if they will be relocated, their ancestral graves, sacred mountains, streams, pools, and other cultural sites will not be preserved and protected if the eviction took place. They also have fear that they will not have free access to these secret places. For instance, currently, the Shangaan people who were evicted to pave way for Marange National Park are not even allowed to visit their former land in Marange, even to see the graves of their ancestors, or to make some ritual ceremony in that place. So they fear that If they evicted currently, they will no longer do the same they used to do. As I mentioned about the indigenous knowledge system, my grandfather once told me that as I come from that area, that sometimes when they displaced in 1960s to pave way for the sugarcane plantation, it spent 4 years without rainfall in Chilonga, and they blamed the displacement for the drought. So the rationale being that the Shangaan elders no longer had access to their secret places of worship and places of performing rituals. They are saying that there is likelihood that they might even face drought due to the displacement, as it happened in 1960s after they were displaced to pave way for the sugarcane plantation. Another painful thing about the eviction is that the communities were argued that they were never consulted. They argued that sometimes it was early this year in April, after that meeting, they will just saw some white people touring their land, driving land cruisers, appeared to be surviving their land. They further out that in January last year, they were made to gather and make declaration of their assets by some people whom they don't know. That's who need that information. So they feel intimidated by these people who claim to have sent by the president. So if it is an eviction, proper procedures to be taken. The people of Chilonga should be consulted. They should be part and parcel of the process. And some villagers heads who are of the opinion that if the government wants the community to benefit from Lucerne grass farming, it should direct gender to contract the community so that they can themselves practice Lucerne farming. They say that they are prepared to be taught by the agri-tax officers and even gender experts to give expect to the communities, like what the Delta scheme is doing with the Shangaan people. The scheme created by Delta is allow the Shangaan farmers to get inputs from Delta and later sold sorghum to them. Last year, a farmer, and averagely a farmer have up to 60 tons of sorghum per season. And the majority of farmers into that scheme owns tractors and other hand farming equipment from that scheme. So other villagers are arguing the government to let gender empower these communities rather than being evicted. They should be direct beneficiaries of the project. And also the affected communities argued that the government should identify alternative land for the investors. That is another opinion within the Shangaan community, that the government should identify another land, either in Masvingo province or somewhere else where they cannot be being displaced, as it can cause a huge suffering to these communities. That was their prayer to the government, if it managed to consult them. Also, the Shangaan people are of the view that
right. Ephraim, I'll give you 2 minutes to wrap up. Then people will also engage with you later during the question and answer session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Farai. Let me try to sum up on the concern being raised by the community, saying that the communities affected people is that there is uncertainty on where they will be relocated to if they are to be evicted. They are not aware as to whether they are or would be basic amenities, as I mentioned, as to where exactly they will be relocated to, and are they going to be compensated? It is excluded from the statutory instrument. So the plan before the displacement among the Shangaan people might be disastrous. It might be disrupt their livelihoods, cultural practice, identity, indigenous knowledge system, and their land rights, and other general human rights might be violated, and also excluding them from consultation and decision-making, subject them to unpredicted distress and suffering before, so during and after the eviction. So that is the view from the community regarding to the proposed eviction, which started in 2020 in April. Thank you, Farai.
Thank you very much, Ephraim. You managed to give us the historical background to this conflict, the absence of free, prior, informed consent in the whole process of attempts to take the land of the Chilonga people and give it to Den Dairy. You managed also to unpack the connection of the Chilonga community to their land and how much this community is a closely knit community. You have unpacked all these things, clearly showing the mood in the community, the level of unhappiness as a result of the statutory instrument and the intention to displace them. It's very clear to me that the community has been speaking with united voice, but it seems nobody was listening. We also hold the company accountable because companies have some codes of conduct they should adhere to. And now I leave this time to our discussants, and the first one will be Janet Zhou, the director of Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCOD, who is going to give us her reflections to the presentation by Ephraim and what needs to be done. Thank you. Janet, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Farai. And thank you, Ephraim, for giving us that synopsis and the summary of what is happening in Chilonga, and also maybe the motives behind it. I think you have made my discussion points easier to make. And for me, I just want to first highlight that what is happening in Chilonga, particularly the displacements to pave way for business or capital, is not an isolated case, but it is a systemic issue with its roots actually in the global political economy. I think in the recent past, we have seen a wave of right-wingers in the economy where they've actually become part of the government, or they are bankrollers of right-wing inclined governments and policies that favor more on the right wing or neoliberal and market-based economies. So globally, I think there is a sweeping wave of this trend, and we have seen that when we are looking at it from that global perspective, we see the big question becomes of policy making being illusory, that government has the people at heart, that they are sincere and deriving their mandate from the people. So when in fact the issue is the interests are business interests, and governments, and like I've said, I think we have seen the tectonic shifts in terms of those in business and business interests actually being part of the government. So the Chilonga case is one that shows us actually where the struggle is going. Sorry, I thought I was muted. So the Chilonga case actually shows us where the struggle is going, or where it has been going in the recent past or post-colonial. My issue is the biggest site for the intense struggles in Zimbabwe in this post-colonial era is actually the issue of communal land relations. The stripping of one of the factors of production or means of production, which is actually land, has been increasing. Like I said, Chilonga is not just one incident. We have seen a lot of displacements in the past, in the post-colonial Zimbabwe, where issues of ownership, issues of capital, issues of labor and entrepreneurship have actually been taken away from communities as we thrive towards business focus, private sector-led development. And in the process, we therefore see the trampling of human rights and community rights, women's rights, youth rights, and most vulnerable groups actually suffering in the end because of this grabbing of land and means of production that we have seen. When we are looking at this issue as well of the side of communal land relations between the state, business, and the people, the big questions that we should be raising are issues of title holding, which is the role of families, traditional leaders, new land owners, and the role of the state as the acclaimed owners of all land, and also then the coming in of arbitrary land use changes. For me, the issue of land use should be decided openly through consultations, but we see the arbitrary land use changes where the state just decides that we are now using this land for this specific issue, and in the process violating people's rights. My key points to Ephraim, just to buttress on some of the issues that he has raised. I think as we move forward with it and look at Chilonga, but also broadly, the broad issues around investments, around the issue of Zimbabwe is open for business. What we need to be looking at is one, the issue of business risks that have actually evolved, especially where natural resources are involved. Whereas maybe in the past, businesses used to look at risks in terms of what tax regimes are in a country, ease of doing business policies, and you know, the tax incentives maybe that are given by a particular government. I think this has evolved over time to a point where the risks are now posed by conflicts that will come if communities are not engaged. The risks now come from the impact on the environment. The risks now come in that you don't only have to be caring more about the majority, impact on the majority, but also the minority rights have really become a big issue. Reputational risks and community perceptions about business is a big issue, which has to be considered. So in light of the evolving business risks, I would want to think that it is time that we include social licenses when it comes to the issue of operating, so that we do not have public perceptions that scuttle projects or create implementation bottlenecks. So in this case of Chilonga and others that have come before and that are going to come before, because this is a whole ideological and economic model that we are taking, there is need and a business case to engage with affected communities and get buy-in, which is very critical. And the right to say no must actually be respected. And it's a continuous process because business risks, as I have said, they evolve, they change from maybe when a business idea begins or from when the initial investment phase. I think Ephraim has raised a big issue around compensation. How policies must be very clear. Even our Zimbabwe, for example, is open for business, should be very clear in terms of compensation where there is need to pave way for investments. We cannot trample upon people's constitutional rights, and including, their inherent rights and attachment that they have to their community, to their land, to their, all the sites that they have. So we have to be talking about compensation and agreeing on that in the event that we need to pave way for business. My second issue is around the tax justice issue as a key component that we have to look at when we are looking at disbursements. So there's need for transparency and accountability when it comes to the benefits that are going to accrue both to the nation and to the community. I think this hasn't been clear in previous displacements, including the Chilonga displacement. What we hear are macroeconomic indicators that have very little bearing on the livelihoods and household incomes of those displaced communities. I'll give an example of this Chilonga, because you'll be told that Zimbabwe needs about 180 million liters of milk per year for our consumption, maybe before we even talk about exporting. But this is not close to someone's livelihood and household income in terms of how is that going to translate into a benefit for the people of Chilonga or for a displaced community for a particular project initiated either by the state or by business. So we need to be very clear around transparency and accountability on the issue of tax justice. There is an African proverb that I always like, which says, if you are shelling groundnuts for someone who cannot see or for someone who is blind, you have to keep whistling so that they are sure that you are not eating their groundnuts. I think this is what has been lacking on the contracts, on the investments, opportunities that the government is attracting as we try to be on the path for our economic recovery. So the benefits or tax justice will look beyond the macroeconomic indicators. Let's talk about community enterprise. Let's talk about tax revenue to the local authority, to the Chiredzi community. Let's talk about local employment, skills development, infrastructure sharing, corporate social investments, and the environmental management issues. I think this is quite key. My other point, Farai, I'm almost coming to an end, is around, our political economy is one that is very tricky and has got a lot of mistrust. And we know that we sometimes move on a command economy kind of model. But we need to also know in terms of the safeguards that are put in place to minimize corruption and elite capture. I think this issue of elite capture goes and sweeps across the whole region, and we need to talk about it. What are the safeguards in Chilonga? This can be through beneficial ownership disclosures that are open platforms, so that there are no camouflages in terms of who exactly is going to benefit from these projects. My other issue is on the accountability. When we are talking about business and human rights, I think it is time from what Ephraim has given us for business or companies to pay the cost of oversight, to pay for the cost of foresight on corporate social investment projects, so that we ensure robust social accountability. The people that are in that community should be able to hold accountable, should be able to have social accountability tools that speak to the cost-benefit analysis of the investment that the government makes. My fifth point is on a rights-respecting and rural-centered economic development model. I think it is high time we really go deeper in terms of the kind of business that we are opening up to and how it's rights-respecting, how it's rural-centered. most of our population depends on the rural economy, and the rural economy is in mining, it's in agriculture. That is where most of the people, over 70% of Zimbabweans, depend on these sectors that I have spoken to for employment, for food, and for their income. And we cannot afford to just commercialize land without first exploring opportunities of how to make that land more productive for the small scale, maybe producers or miners that are in those communities. We need to start talking about rights respecting and rural-centered economies that respond to the gender issues, that respond to the youth issues and other vulnerable groups issues. And our indicators for growth, like I've said, will therefore shift towards, a rights-based approach where we will say, for example, in Chiredzi community, with this project or investment, how many schools are we going to get? How many clinics are we going to get? And access to entrepreneurship, development of entrepreneurship. So we need to be talking about an integrated, inclusive, and sustainable rural socio-economic development framework when we are looking at the whole issue of investments and respecting people's rights within an economy. I'll just end by giving an analogy of a marriage setup in an African context. There are two ways you can do it modern and get your marriage certificate. Then there is the traditional way of doing it. So if you go to the court and you get your marriage certificate, you still have to do the traditional route. You cannot go and flaunt your marriage certificate to your in-laws and say, respect my relationship. I am now moving in with my spouse. You still have to do the traditional rights. So whatever you do in signing a contract, in agreeing on business, has to get the buy-in of the community. We have to foster partnerships, respectful relationships, and that are actually mutually beneficial. This is where we have to go, and we have to be pushing our government to go back to the mundane functions of empowering citizens towards self-sustenance, to be able to participate in the economy, for ownership, and be able to also contribute to the investments in their rural economies. I think if we go that route, we are going to have rights respecting economies. We are going to alleviate the violence of inequality, the violence of poverty, which most of these communities have actually continued to suffer. We look at inequality, we look at poverty, we look at displacements from a social perspective, but these are political issues and they have to be politicized as such and ask the critical political questions from the global level where we are moving to our national level, to our provincial and government levels, in terms of how we are engaging and facilitating that communities fully participate and have their rights respected in doing business. Thank you, Farai, and I hand over to you.
So, thank you very much, Janet, for that elaborate and brilliant response. You say development must be people-centered, and I could not have said it any better. The poverty in Zimbabwe, especially in rural Zimbabwe, it's not because they are poor, they don't have resources, but it's because when those resources are being extracted, it's for the benefit of those with power, those with guns, or those who command those with guns. So this is very important that we also look at the issue of land tenure, so that people have got land rights. If you look at the Communal Lands Act, it only says the president will allow people to occupy and utilize that land, but it doesn't give them right to own the land they occupy. Hence, you also talked about the right to say no. Now, where do we get that right? Where do we get the power? July Moyo invoked a statutory instrument to evict the residents of Chilonga. And we are saying no to that. Now we get to the next stage. Professor Maduku is going to talk about the legality or lack of it, the constitutionality or the lack of it in terms of Statutory Instrument 50 of 2021, and the intention of the government of Zimbabwe to displace the Chilonga community from their ancestral homeland. We are very honored that Professor Maduku, you have spared time to come and share with us your views on the developments in Chilonga. So it's over to you, Prof. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity that I've been given to just share my thoughts on the issues around the Chilonga matter, and particularly that I'm required to just comment on what Farah is saying is the legality or constitutionality of it. I will certainly do that. I won't be long. But I want to start on a very familiar territory, which is an important territory for Zimbabweans. That territory is as follows. Zimbabweans always live with unjust laws around them. They live with oppressive laws around them. Generally, they say nothing about those laws, but they live with them. Then something happens. The unjust laws are resorted to. Then sometimes we make noise about it like we are doing now, and so forth. Then perhaps after some time, we have important players like, I think what the organizers of this platform have done, I think Farah and others who are in this activism, very important that we have that. But it doesn't take us away from what I'm calling our familiar territory as Zimbabwe. This idea of living with unjust, undemocratic, unconstitutional laws, only making noise when those laws are being resorted to. And I want to appeal to almost all of us as we try and learn something from this platform. But I think we must get a more generalized approach to the way in which we are governed and the laws that are in place in the country, and adopt a broad-based approach which allows us to engage injustice, engage unconstitutionality as a general trend, rather than to do it on a piecemeal basis. That is what I wanted to start with. So I will turn now to what has happened in Chilonga. As far as I'm concerned, it's very clear that it's unconstitutional. What has happened? It's clearly illegal. And I will show how it is illegal, what has happened. I will start with the fact that we have learned in this country, and every Zimbabwean generally is entitled to be staying where they are staying. So whenever you are staying where you are staying, our law will tell you what it is. The most common thing about where anyone is staying is what we call a home. In other words, if you stay somewhere, it might not be legal where you are staying or whatever, but the most common denominator is that if you are habitually staying at a given place, you live your life from there, we call that a home. Now, we have decided in our constitution to protect people with their homes. I'm starting with the home. So if we take it from a home perspective, if we take the home theme, then we have a provision in section 74 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which says that no person shall be arbitrarily evicted from their home without an order of court. So obviously, we can do a very easy legal process here. Do the people in Chilonga have a home? Are the Chilonga villagers in their homes? I'm sure the answer is yes, they are in their homes. Now, they are being evicted, or there is a plan to evict them. Has that eviction been authorized by a court of law? The answer is no. So if we take it from a home, the statutory instrument itself will not take away the arbitrariness, the mere existence that there's a statutory instrument, the mere existence of an order by the president, which is some instrument that says this land is taken from this to that. That element, all those do not qualify. They do not satisfy Section 74 of the Constitution. So purely from a home conception, which is a very important conception itself, and is a very broad conception. A home entails so many things. Section 74 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe has not been complied with, whatever is happening. Now, that Section 74 of the Constitution, because it's in the Constitution, it overrides any other law that would try and authorize the contrary. Let's say the Minister of Local Government were to say, I have powers in the Communal Lands Act, so I am using my powers there, or the President says I have powers in the Communal Lands Act, all that is completely out because of Section 74. I'm sure every person knows that Section 2 of the Constitution says that the Constitution, the supreme law of Zimbabwe, any law inconsistent with it is void. So clearly, I would use that as a very easy approach to this. So one is unconstitutional on the basis of the home theory, the approach to home on the basis of Section 74. I have not yet heard anyone who will say that there is a way in which you can justify that. Section 74 does not allow any justifications of the sort that may be attempted by the Communal Lands Act. So that's clear, that point number one. Then I will take another angle which shows the unconstitutionality of what they're doing. Of course, I hope that everyone is understanding that when we say something is unconstitutional, then we are saying it's unlawful. We are saying it's illegal. So it's a question of using different terms by different people. But here we must be clear that there is that lack of legality. But let me go to the second one, which is a much more serious issue. It relates to the whole concept of land ownership and rights to land under our law. Now we have a colonial hangover. When the colonial persons came here, they decided that land was to be only owned by the privileged colonial settlers. Everyone else could not own land. But then they also went ahead at some point to create some areas which were to be areas where Africans would live in. Then these areas graduated after independence to be communal land. I'm sure most people would know various names that these things, these places got. I'm sorry for the use of the word things. These places got. You'd have native reserves, you'd have tribal trust lands, you'd have all these terms. But now we call them communal areas. Now, who owns those areas? What are the rights in relation to the communal area? Now, a concept came before we got our own republic. That land in the communal areas, then in the natives, was said to vest in the Queen or Her Majesty or His Majesty at that time. The crown in the United Kingdom or England was the one that owned. But I think that after that, people never got to say what is meant by the statement that this land is owned by the crown. Then after independence, the Communal Lands Act went on to provide that communal land vests in the president. It doesn't say that communal land vests in the state. It uses this very peculiar concept of communal land vesting in the president. Now, what does it mean? It doesn't mean that the president owns that land. It doesn't mean that it is the president's land which he can do as he pleases or which he can do as he wishes. That doesn't mean that. It actually means the opposite of that. Every person in a communal area has a unique kind of right to the land that they occupy, which right cannot be interfered with. And that the interference by government on the issue that it vests in the president is wrong. It is wrong because the president is merely a trustee. And the vesting in the president doesn't give the president the power to be able to move people around, like simply say, I've taken this portion of land, it now belongs to this. You were staying here, you no longer do that. Their rights are in a lawyers use an expression in Latin called sui generis. That's something that is special. And that is what happens with this kind of thing. I want to indicate to many of you who are listening that a point must be made legally to say that even the sections in the Communal Land Act which tend to say that the president can take away land, those sections are wrong. They are unconstitutional. The only reason why land is based in the president is that communal people, there are millions of them, and the colonial land registration system found it impracticable to give each person a title and create a register that would have had over 7 or 8 million people on the deeds registry. So then they devised the formula that this land shall vest in the queen or in the crown or in the head of state. It never meant that those people have no rights whatsoever to that land. And I'm arguing here that communal land people have special sui generis, that's the term to use, rights to the land that they have. And that in respect of that right that they have, they cannot be moved away in the way the government is proposing. That takes me to that second illegality, second unconstitutionality element. If I may repeat, my first point is that is a constitutional infringement of Section 74 of the Constitution. My second point is that it is unlawful and unconstitutional on the basis of a proper reading of Section 71 of the Constitution, which has rights to property, and that communal people also have property rights protected by Section 71 of the Constitution. Only that our courts have not developed this concept. Also that most of our African academics have not developed a proper African jurisprudence around the right to communal land. But I want to prove to across that that would be. I want to go to the third illegality, which I would end at that too, because I can go on and on, but I'm just demonstrating that it's unlawful. The third illegality goes to the steps that ought to be taken if anyone were to want to do some relocation, some movement of people in terms of the scale that is contemplated by the kind of movement that is happening in Chilonga. Now, with this third illegality, it takes in all the points that have been raised by the previous speaker, and also I think what I've read around. Surely, there are rights to what we call administrative justice. Administrative justice requires engagement between public authorities and those people that are going to be affected. Clear reasons why you would want to move in a particular way. Broad debate, get those people to discuss with you options that are available. So if you want to grow grass or whatever, I mean, there should be a discussion as to where there are no other areas that may actually not be inhabited by people where you could still get your grass and people get to contribute to that. You cannot just move to where people are and say, okay, I want to do a particular project here. And then they have an input yet to what kind of project that is and what benefits will accrue in respect of those. Then when the conception that I'm giving in terms of administrative justice in a broad sense, it would require serious engagement of the people affected, not only serious engagement of the people affected, it will also require public participation in those, so that you treat all people equally. If you decide to engage the Chilonga people, they have a right to ask, so if you are coming here in Chilonga and you have decided that this is our place, have you considered some place in this corner of the country or another place in that corner of the country? Why have you chosen this particular place? So there's also these issues to do with equality. We must be treated equally. And that we cannot suddenly say that it's different from where you are discovering a mineral and you want to displace people because there is some mineral that there's diamond, there's gold. Obviously, there you might say you have a good reason, we would want to move you away from here because in this particular place we've discovered that there is a mineral underground and so forth, things like that. But if the kind of considerations that are being put in place in relation to Chilonga, they don't indicate why that, and so under administrative justice conception, several sections of the Constitution would arise. We have a section 68 which would arise, but we also have section 56 of the Constitution that requires all people to be treated equally and to have equal benefit of the law. And so an element might arise of discrimination. Why this particular community? That must be debated. I will give the scenario of a comparison between this and what we have put in the Constitution. The Constitution is saying when you want to take land from anyone, Section 71, Section 72 of the Constitution, there are processes that are properly put. Let's say it's agricultural land, there are procedures that must be followed. If it is any property, there are procedures that must be followed. And then there's also clear regime for paying for compensation, which has to be outside agricultural land, it has to be adequate. So what sort of compensatory mechanisms are in place for the Chilonga people? We actually know that there is not such framework that is in existence. Government is reacting each time some noise is made. They react to each every time some critics come out and say a thing, then they start to react. I mean, so you can't move like that. If you saw what they did with amending the statutory instrument, moving from, I think, growing grass to irrigation, no one knows whether that is true or not. But this idea of clearly moving around and all over the place, you try and change your things. These are things that would fall of the third area of an illegality. I think to the conveners, you'll obviously notice that when a lawyer is required, is required to give an address on constitutionality or illegality, and you're addressing the broader public, you must not be very technical. That's what I'm trying to do. But I must leave the audience and everyone listening with the three broad areas of illegality. Illegality number one is the home front, where these people cannot simply be taken away from their homes without respecting Section 74 of our Constitution. The second area of illegality and unconstitutionality refers to land rights of people occupying communal areas. And my position, quite clearly, is that these people have a unique type of right to their land, which unique type of right is almost equivalent to the private property right that other people enjoy in respect of their homes or in respect of their land and so forth. And that is only because African jurisprudence has not developed extensively that concept, etc. Then my third area of illegality has been what I've put in the broad area of administrative justice. What has to be taken into account before you confront anyone, you have what alternatives exist, and so on. So having said that, there is no doubt in my mind that there is a lot of illegality surrounding the Chilonga issue. It's a question of what you do. But I must now go to another territory in Zimbabwe. That territory in Zimbabwe is that when you then go to the court, you will have to contend with the fact that the courts may not necessarily come to the conclusions that we are putting across. And it's not just the territory in Zimbabwe, almost everywhere. Ultimately, what is lawful and what is unlawful is a question that is determined by the court. Now, you also need the courts to be there to understand what we are saying. So when we move to the illegality and go to the court, there will be a lot required to persuade the courts to see things in the way in which we are putting across. So that the legal route is a very important one. It only comes to an end if the courts decide to disagree. But that should not be the end of the advocate. I don't believe that the courts, if properly approached, if these points are properly ventilated, I believe that our courts will rise to the occasion and certainly ensure that there is justice in what is happening in Chilonga. So what it means from my presentation is that we must still tell the government that what it is doing is unconstitutional. And if they believe it is constitutional, they must respond to these arguments we are making, because these arguments are being made publicly. That's what a democracy is. Government must know that its citizens are concerned, that we are raising these arguments. If they believe that these arguments are without merit, let them deploy the public officials that are in place for that purpose. We have an attorney general who is the government and legal advisor. Let the attorney general publish an opinion and say this is the government position. The government believes that what it is doing is lawful, that what it is doing is constitutional, that the arguments we are raising are without sense. Then in that case, we can deal with that. That's the point that I wish to really make about legality and so on. Then if I still have time, I would say that finally, Zimbabweans must know that protection comes outside the law as well. The law is not the only framework where we get our protection. There are many Zimbabweans who sometimes think that everything must be taken legally. But sometimes if you feel that something is wrong, you put it across illegally. You may not succeed legally if the courts disagree with you, but you must take it up always by the power of the people. The power of the people is the power of putting across our voices. If we keep saying that it is wrong, it is unjust, it is wrong, it is unjust, and we repeat that, we say that out to those people who are doing it, we conscientize every Zimbabwean to keep saying that, then we will succeed. No government will continue to do these things. And if it might take, for example, we used to have that in the past, I'm sure it can still happen. You don't need to engage in anything. Some peaceful ways of doing it is clear. Petitions must be sent out. All these clear issues that are taking place must continue to take place. If I were still in the old days, we would go for demonstrations, and I'm sure that they can still be done. Let's get that. And I think that people must get out of this Zimbabwean terrain that I've indicated to live around unjust laws. Like a person who lives in a house that is dirty with all that thing, or what you see in the urban areas. People do not have water, and then you also find that there's no refuse collection. We can make it normal. Here we also have such a situation where people get the habit. And I want to close by saying that to Farai, I think the convener, that if I were to be understood, I must still end where I started. Zimbabweans must get out of the habit of living around with unjust laws. I have a colleague that I've had debates with over the recall provisions in Parliament. And they'll keep saying when an MP is recalled, they debate and so forth. They don't debate the just nature of it. That provision is unjust, but it must not be allowed to live to be within the statute. Those will be my remarks. I think I've done what I can do at best, and then I would wait to hear whatever there are questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Maduku. Very precise presentation on the illegality and constitutionality of the abuse of the Communal Lands Act. Thank you very much, Prof. And I take note of your last point that protection is not always in the law, or it's not exclusively a preserve of the law. But there are other means by which people can find protection, like what we're doing right now. The campaign that has been going on, Save the Chilonga Community Campaign. So we really appreciate this. Thank you very much for sharing us these words of wisdom. Now, I will open the forum to anyone who has got a question or a comment, please show by raising your hand in the chat box. I'm sure the team in the back room will help us to give you access. Okay. Dr. Pilani Zamchia, thank you very much for being on this forum. Please, the floor is yours. You want to make a point. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thanks to the host and thanks to the presenters. I think all the presenters were fantastic. Thanks, Professor Love Momad, Janet, and April. I will not try to repeat what has been said, but my starting point will be to take over from what Prof. Madu was trying to say about the debates around customer land. I think that even if you look at the term Communal Land Act, it's actually quite problematic, because that communal, it has got some colonial connotations. And those connotations are that this land is vacant and actually no one even owns it. So it becomes very difficult for a post-colonial government to inherit that mentality. But we have another debate about customer land tenure. And quickly, let me just say 3 things that have not been debated in my thinking. Number 1, I think that civil society should actually engage in debates about what is the kind of rural development that they want to see. We should allow civil society and the people to debate this, to say what is the kind of rural development that they want to see. And that is actually lacking in terms of national discourse. So I think it's important, 1, to go beyond analyzing this kind of land deals, business deals, through a narrow focus on business efficiency in terms of economic returns to land, labor, and capital. Because what you do as civil society is that you then advance this kind of industrial business modernization narrative of the colonial era as the only pathway to development. And you begin to dream that there's gonna be some de-peasantization of some sort, where you have your peasants, Chilonga farmers disappearing and becoming rural proletarians to Dendale. So yeah, that's a model that should be, critic. And the second is that what I hear from civil society is an alternative of some kind of coexistence, rural developmental path, where you can achieve both. Perhaps you have your dairy, but also you have the people of Chilonga benefiting. But that's not going to work with the kind of state you have in Zimbabwe. The regulations are weak. We have bad laws, as Professor Maduku has said. There is weak governance. You have gender-blind regulations. There are unequal power relations between the state and the dairy. And this regulatory path also comes from your kind of World Bank, pro-big business and so forth, and never applies to the locality. So the real debate should be, from my perspective, what is the alternative developmental path for rural Zimbabwe today? And emphasis, to me, should be on developmental projects that ensures that women and men do not lose their customary land. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Zamchia. Actually, Dr. Zamchia penned an article 2 weeks ago where he outlined some of the things he's talking about right now. And I've pasted the link in the chat box, which we can read in our spare time. But thank you very much for that very important input. And now I will leave time to Godfrey Mabunda. Thank you. Proceed, Godfrey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farai and the convener. My name is Godfrey Mawunda. I come from Chiredzi. The issue at hand is very painful. As somebody who has been ejected from the country due to the situation in the country, I'll just give a brief background of what Chilonga means and the communities there. We are a Shangaan minority group. As you should all know that from 1980, we were a community that was in the country. Our parents participated in the liberation struggle. And in that participation, when we got the independence, the post-colonial government did not recognize us as a people. We were only treated as a minority people. We were denied an opportunity to learn our language at school. I'm one of the people who learned Shona. I've got a B in Shona. I didn't learn my natural language. Let's fast forward and leave that. Most of the households in Chilonga have got, on average, almost all the economically active age group in South Africa or everywhere in the world. And the parents and all the elderly people that are left home depends on us who are in the diaspora to send them livelihoods. And they also do farming. And let me also hasten to say, in that kind of farming, there is no meaningful support that comes from the government whatsoever. The community have built up itself to make sure that they have self-sustenance. And that self-sustenance came from, as Mr. Mtombeni said, cattle rearing and peasant farming. That was also supported by Delta and other consortiums that bought their produces. So with that said, we are actually sandwiched between the national park and the cane fields of Hippo Valley or the Tonga Halets. That part of land, as Professor Maduku said, is the only place we call home. There is no any other place we call home. As much as we are Zimbabweans, whenever we were to be taken away to Mashonaland East, West, or Central, Matabeleland North or South, or Manicaland, we will integrate with time. But is that necessary now? If the government wants to displace us, they do have the power to do that. But the question is it really necessary to displace the whole people in favor of Mr. Kotsie, a then dairy owner? If they took up arms then and fought the repressive government of the day for land, why would a black government today displace brethren to give or in favor of one white farmer? There is so much land that is lying fallow in Zimbabwe or just nearby in Masvingo province that can surely be given to Mr. Kotsie or the Den Dairy Consortium. Why would the government take that only land from the people that are not only minority, but have never benefited from, or they never benefited meaningfully from the results of the liberation struggle? Is this how we got compensated for being Zimbabweans? It gives us a very, very bad thing, because we would say that we suffered tribalism so much, because when you know that this country has got people of Shangaan extraction or Tsonga extraction, but deny them their right to be themselves. And now, as if that is not enough, now you come and say, Statutory 50 of 2021, you have to move because there's a farmer that wants to come and make some sorghum or some Lucerne propagation. It's really, really unfair. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Godfrey. Thank you very much for your views. If you don't come from a minority group, you may not understand the pain which Godfrey is speaking with. But these things are very, very real. and we have to take them very seriously. Now, to the remaining contributors who want to ask a question, whatever, I'm more keen now to see what can we do? How do we get out of this reactionary mode to address the issues which Professor Maduka has talked about, that usually we react when there's a problem. 10 years ago, it was Marange. Today, it is Chilonga. Tomorrow, it is Wange. Next month, it will be Mount Darwin. How do we move out of this reactionary mode to solve this issue once and for all and ensure that Zimbabweans enjoy being Zimbabwean in their land? Blessing.
Mandaza. Thank you so much for that. You actually touched on part of my question. It was going to be on how we intend to, or maybe how the speakers see this issue of amending the resettlement policy framework. There's the issue of compensation, there's this issue of continued displacement. So yes, how do we get out of this reactionary mode? That was going to be my question.
Oh, thank you very much, Blessing. I hope the presenters are also going to come back. We are just about to wind down now. Tony, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you to the presenters for an extremely erudite analysis of the problem. I want to raise the problem from Chilonga to a much broader perspective. And this is the issue of displacements generally. I think if anybody's been watching displacements over the last 2 decades, it's very clear that pretty much all displacements have either a political motive or an economic motive, or both. I'll give you 2 examples. Muramba China, I think, was very clear in pursuit of a political objective, the demolition of urban support for the movement for democratic change. The land displacements that followed the fast-track land reform program had 2 objectives, in my view. One was the destruction of a potential political base for the movement for democratic change, and secondly, the acquisition of the land. So the question is always, when displacements begin to happen, is what are those 2 deep structure issues that you have to address? And I think they have to be addressed in Chilonga as well. So various speakers have raised this issue in respect of Chilonga, and that is, in the wake of the fast-track land reform program, there are enormous numbers of unoccupied farm in which Lucerne can be grown all over the place. And I've been posting quietly on the side here about, are there other motives that might be behind this? And one story that's come out, and that needs to be investigated more clearly, is that Chilonga and the whole vast tract of land has been identified in the past as the reserve of great mineral resources. So is the question a subterfuge for moving people away into different areas such that this might become available for other kinds of interests? And that leads, of course, to another consideration, is that an enormous amount of this political economic activity leads to what was recently unveiled in the report published by the Daily Maverick, in the way in which vast amounts of the economic resources of Zimbabwe are being controlled by cartels. And you might want to ask, is this another kind of cartel activity? So this is not to demean the importance of cultural rights and people's rights, as Professor Maduka has outlined so importantly. And the implication behind that, of course, is that places where people call home might well be the base for enormous resources. And we have seen displacements in Chiredzi, the displacements in Motoko around Black Granite, in which communities have not reaped the benefits and the enormous benefits that come from extractive industries. So quite clearly, this is not a trivial issue just about cultural rights and land rights and property, etc. It is a very deep structure problem in Zimbabwe, and this needs to be investigated very carefully, and it needs utter transparency about what really is going on. Thank you very much, and thank you to the speakers.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. That's a very critical issue point there. Now, we are about to wind down, and I have Livson and Terence, but I'm also informed that the Honorable Member of Parliament for the affected area is on the platform. We'll give him 2 minutes to give us his views on what is happening and what needs to be done to correct the situation. So Livingstone and Terence, I'm giving you 1 minute each before we move to the Honorable MP, and then we have the speakers rounding up with closing remarks. Thank you.
Can I come in?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Terence,
thank you very much. It's Livson. It's Livson, hello?
Sorry, Livson, go ahead. Apologies about that mix-up. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I would like to highlight the fact that in Chiredzi, we've got a great challenge with the way the district is administered. Every time you hear government claiming that they have consulted the people of Chiredzi over any critical issue of resource allocation, administration, or any other important issue, government does not consult the villagers, the residents of Chiredzi. Government comes from Harare to address the employees they have sent from HQ to come and work in Chiredzi, in ministries, in departments, and elsewhere. They congregate those people in meetings in town and address those and get their consent. What I'm saying here is a true story, and there is evidence to that effect, that when the minister says he came to consult the people of Chiredzi, the only formal meeting that was held in Chiredzi, the people who were there are people from VID, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, the prison services, the President's Department, and donors like Sevaka, I can name them Sevaka, and drama groups, and many trustees who are private entities. Those are the people who are said to represent the people of Chiredzi. And I would like to add the fact that when the people who attended the meeting, which the minister is trying to flout around and say we consulted Chiredzi, at the comment time or at the plenary session, when people contributed, 99.something% of people proved that they did not understand this project and what it is bringing to their land. But when the chairperson was asked to give a roundup of the meeting, he just went ahead and said, we are not objecting to the proposal to bring Lucerne to Chiredzi, while the board of the contributors is saying otherwise. It is actually a shame. And I am so ashamed to say that we have the councillors, we have MPs, we have the senators of this place who are just silent. And I believe these people, these elected officials, those are our first port of call as residents and citizens of Chiredzi. We should do away with them all en masse and re-elect new people who can represent us. And at the same time, pursue the spirit of devolution and demand that from today onwards, we don't want people to be sent from elsewhere to come here and take post in Chiredzi, because these are the people who become residents of Chiredzi and speak on our behalf. Even as I speak, there is a member of the Ministry of Health who is living at the Chilonga area, the affected area. He works for the Ministry of Health, but he is the spy who goes to tell the police and the people who are interested in this project that so and so is against the project, so and so is against the project, and he's the one who points to the villagers' homestead and say that homestead belongs to Mr. Chauke, he is against Lucerne. That member says there is Mr. Moyo, he's against the Lucerne project. And we are saying that as a solution from today onwards, when the ministers or whoever comes to Chiredzi to address the people, they should stop coming to town, go and address the people out there in the villages and stop lying to the people. The papers that came out said all people should move out with all their belongings, meaning that we are being evicted. But the minister yesterday on radio said we are not evicting anyone. Are we fools? And there is this issue that is being used every time we complain. That is tribalism, is tribalism. That is stupid and nonsensical. Call us tribalist and everything, but what we are saying is objective and true. We are being victimized every day. And you don't have representatives from our areas. Go to council, go to the legislature. People who talk on our behalf are not people from Chiredzi. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Livingston, for that candid talk. Very important, and government must respect the right of people to say no. And holding a meeting with people, just coming for a meeting in the company of soldiers and whosoever, does not mean a consultation is taking place. So we really need to rethink the concept of consultation. I've seen Dr. Zamchi has also posted a comment with regard to that. Now, let me move to Terence. We are running out of time. And meanwhile, I hope the MP is prepared to say a word or two. Terence, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Farai, and thanks for organizing this very important discussion. I wanted to just quickly and very briefly buttress a point that was raised by Professor Maduku earlier, around picking our social justice battles on a more sustainable rather than ad hoc manner. I think clearly what we are finding from the wave of evictions, displacements, and particularly the one involving the Chilonga people and Den Dairy, speaks more to the issue around the neoliberal collusion between the state and business or capital. And I think what we need to do, in trying to fight some of these social justice battles is to be able to clearly identify the ideological plane on which to fight and resist some of these issues. And for me, clearly what is coming out is that the state has chosen to collude with business at the expense of the people. And therefore, our battles need to respond, accordingly to how to fight such a collusion and make it more sustainable and more people-centered rather than excluding or exclusionary of the people. That's
Thank you, Terence. Thank you very much. And now, I leave this time to the Honorable Member of Parliament for the affected area. Unfortunately, I could not identify. I just saw in the chat box that the MP is here. Honorable, if you can unmute yourself. Okay. Whilst we attend to that, sorry, is that Honorable, what's the name of the Honorable now? Is it Honorable Mastia? Can we unmute Honorable Mastia so that he can speak?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Surely I am the MP for the area that is under discussion. I am happy to be part of this evening, and I'm listening carefully, and I'm taking note of all the contributions that are coming through. Mr. Chairman, the project or the intended eviction of the people is something that is beyond my control as an MP. I am happy to hear your views, and I will put together that of the government as well and see the best way forward for the people that I represent in the constituency. But my only question was, it's said that these groups come a little late because this draconian law was there before independence, and we are now 41 years after independence. But we did not hear about it from organizations like Lawyers for Human Rights and ETC. This thing could have been stopped well. So I am a bit here why such organization, useful organization like this that are on view now, wait until the community fight their government to only come and tell us that the laws that we survived with is bad, draconian. So it's look, we are all to blame. That's my view. And because at some stage within whoever drafted the SI thought he was using a constitution that we abide to. Only to note that like Mr. Maduku has said, we are getting to know how wrong or good the law is only today. It's said. I am the MP for that area. Surely, I share that part with the Honorable Vanessa, but we felt it is necessary that we be part of this discussion. I thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Honorable Vanessa is just by me here, who can also start his video and talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Honorable Vanessa.
Good panel.
Welcome. Please proceed.
Yeah, I'm Honorable Vanessa. We share the Chiredzi south of Runde. I am of Chiredzi South constituency, although it is not affected, but what affects everybody south of Runde, it affects me wholeheartedly. Like has been put across, we are between the rock and the deep sea. Shall I oppose? Yes, the SI was very draconian, was very faulty, but how can I actually call it faulty when the Constitution still stands as it is? And Professor Maduku would agree with me, constitutional changes is a process. It's not an event. And in that case, I am in sync, very in sync with the community. I wouldn't like people to be displaced. I wouldn't like people to leave their ancestral lands to an area that is unknown. That SI was faulty. People are going to be expelled. People are going to be evicted to where, when, and where. It leaves everybody who is there to really question what's the intention. It is now damage control. When somebody says, no, we didn't mean A, B, C, D, and yet it's really black and white. I heard somebody saying the councillors, the MPs have been silent. Yes. In my case, I've been very, very, very silent, in the sense that as a legislator, I don't talk my mind, not coming from the people. I have to consult the people. What is good for them? I also consult what are the benefits of that we accrue from this project without any conclusion. What else do you expect me to give to my community? I also need to gather, because today I might say this project is bad, and then some other people come in and get the project, and then tomorrow they say the project is good. So it is a period of consultation, serious consultation. And when we also get back to the Constitution, this aspect is not a legislative. It is a project which was consulted at the council. I only attend the council at a full council. So I also get to find out what the Chiredzi Rural District Council has passed. If I don't have the answer from Chiredzi Rural District Council, I don't think I will be able to come in as a legislator. So that's the view. That's why I have been keeping quiet. But it's not that I am consulted. I am consulting the people that voted me to be a legislator. I am also consulting with the government so as to come up, probably, if we might say, let's have a win-win situation. But I cannot determine the win-win situation as an individual. Win-win situation comes about when the two, that is the locals and the government, come to an agreement. So basically that's my view and that's my contribution. But I want to thank you very much, all those that are convened this very, very important and critical meeting. We are really at crossroads. And but however, we are also saying, you as lawyers, precedent has been set in Chiredzi, precedent has been set in Mutoko, precedent has been set in Muroa. In that case, really as a legislator, I am really found in between. What do I do in terms of the law? Because a precedent has been set. So thank you very much for convening this very, very discussion.
Honorable Gwanetsa.
Very enriching. We get to know certain things that we did not know. But thank you very much for coming up with a very important burning issue as far as Chilonga scheme is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Gwanetsa and Honorable Masia, for your views. I just want to respond and say, you are legislators, as rightly say, which means you are lawmakers. It's now 8 years since we had a new constitution, and the expectations of the Zimbabwean people pertaining to the mandate which we were given by the constitution is to ensure that the laws of Zimbabwe comply with the constitution, as Professor Maduku rightly said. So it is my hope that the Chilonga case is a wake-up call for you, and that within a week or two, one of you or both of you, Honorable Gwanetsa and Honorable Masia, you are going to start a legislative process in Parliament demanding that the Communal Lands Act be amended or be repealed so that it aligns with the Constitution of Zimbabwe. It's not the duty of human rights lawyers to make laws. They are there to challenge unjust laws, which they are doing very well. But we need you to play your legislative role of making good laws for the country. So take this as a wake-up call. You know, all parliamentarians, you need to take this as your baby, not just the two of you, because more and more communities are going to be affected. And we don't want to continue living with this shame where our people, our elderly people, our parents, our brothers and our sisters, they are living like squatters in their own land, which they liberated. And so please come to the party, honorable members of parliament. Thank you. Now I leave this time to the presenters to give their final parting shots It has been a very rich debate and discussion, and the tone was set very well by the three speakers. So I'll start with the same order with Ephraim Mtombeni, the director of MACRAD, to give us his closing remarks after listening to all the contributions, but mainly, what shall we do? I want us to answer the question, what shall we do to make sure that the issue going on in Chilonga will never happen again? Thank you. Over to you, Ephraim.
Yeah, thank you, Farai. My last contribution is very clear to the government. The Shangaan people have to participate in the decision-making process, not as affected people, but as primary actors who contribute to socio-economic value of the Lucerne project through their expectations of its cost and benefits when it is going to affect the people. Then the affected people, in this case, the Shangaan people, should have the right to collectively negotiate design, planning, implementation, and monitoring and the evaluation of the eviction. And also as the government is deciding to evict the villagers, they need to prioritize the needs of the vulnerable groups, such as women, children, elderly, and other vulnerable groups. And lastly, as citizens, as Professor Madugu alluded, we should challenge the injustice law. But at the same time, we need to containerise the communities. At the same time, we need elected officials to push that, so that the policies will not violate our rights. And lastly, it is the duty of everyone to amplify the voices of the marginalized indigenous people afraid of other projects which have taken place before, the Chibunkosi Gem project, the Sumbanje ethanol project. So the government should know that these communities in Chilonga, they are aware of what is happening in all these projects which are coming as if they are going to develop our constituency. But it should be clear, as there is mistrust within the citizens and the government. And the people, particularly the Shangaan people, rather than the Shangaan people know about their fiction on social media without proper communication, without proper procedures being followed. I think.
Okay. Thank you, Ephraim, for those wonderful closing remarks. And now it's over to Janet Jo. Would you please give us your closing remarks? Thank you.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Farai, and thank you for all the contributions and the comments that have come. I totally agree that we need to up our game in terms of being reactionary, in terms of the apathy and living with unjust laws. And I think as civil society, we have tried in terms of being propositional. We are talking about development of the rural economies. We have questioned the issue of metrics that are currently being used, Dr. Zamchia, in terms of the indicators that are at a very macro level, but have no meaning to the lower levels of government and people's livelihoods. So the issue of metrics that do not speak to the rural economy and rural economic development, we have questioned those, and our proposition is that let's go back to basics. And these basics are issues of revenue sharing, issues of local content development, local employment, and all the infrastructure development and sharing and the like. Those are some of the issues that I was trying to raise. Then there is the issue of the role of the state as a regulator. But we also the role of the state is in advancing state capitalism in some of the arbitrary takeover and grabbing of the factors of production like land, control over labor, capital and the like. So that issue of state capitalism and respect for human rights is also a big issue when we're talking about a rights-respecting economy. There must be new ways of doing business given the new risks that we've spoken about, which means that we have to put the community at the center. We have to respect, like I've said, the issues of local content development, revenue sharing.
Okay, I think a technical glitch there with the Janet, but I think we got her main points. Now I hand over to Professor Maduku to give us his closing remarks on what can we do differently going forward to make sure that Zimbabwe has got security in their homes.
Thank you very much. I think I really enjoyed the discussion. And I'll just have just one or two words in conclusion. I must say that I accept most of the propositions given, but I was very much attracted by what Dr. Zamchia said there, that people must move beyond consultation to go to what he called consent. I entirely endorse. I think that would be the best way of ending my position. I must say, I think everyone knows that it is not God who said Chilonga people must be moved. That we know. It's not God. God never came into these things, etc. It is someone else. It is a government somewhere that says, well, we want to move these people to that. We must know that governments always have limited powers. So with this particular framework, it remains with us to move quite clearly to insist that this Chilonga process be not taken to the conclusion that the government wants to take it to without the concerns that we have raised. Ultimately, I think they should reverse their process and come up with a situation which is a clear benefit to all of us, including the people in Chilonga. So I would want to end it that way and say that I've enjoyed everything. Good luck in all our endeavors.
Thank you, Professor Maduku. Thank you, the speakers. And I think in conclusion, I'll say, let us resist what is unjust. Let us hold on to our heritage. Let us hold on to our land. If anyone comes to your community, I don't care that they'll be carrying guns. I don't care whatever letter they are carrying in their hand. You have a responsibility as a community to ring fence what rightfully belongs to you. And collectively as Zimbabweans, let's unite and protect our heritage. Thank you very much. I want to thank you. I will leave this time to Dr. Ibo Mandaza, the convener, to give us closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Farai. I have nothing much to say, except to thank you. And again, to reiterate what you said at the beginning. We are pleased as SAPIS Policy Dialogue Forum to be associated with this very important discussion. I think it's one of the liveliest we've ever had as a policy dialogue program. The level of interaction, the level of intervention, and including the participation of members of the legislature. It was a very rich discussion, but I think we would have lost it if we did not highlight the point made by both Professor Maduku and Farai, that we must resist that which is unjust, which is unconstitutional, which is illegal, and seek not to get some kind of a compromise, but simply to get government to reverse, to annul this intention. It is a lost cause. I think that is clearly has been the purpose of this discussion, to oppose and have revoked the intention to displace the whole community in the interest of what is clearly a commercial venture to do with, not just with Lucerne, Shapiers recover, but to do with diamonds and gold. That theme is emerging. And I think it will be important for those of us involved in the extractive industry research, like Farai's organization, to expose that, what it is in the first instance, so that the community, the nation as a whole, and the region and the international community understand what Chilonga is all about. So I thank you, and we look forward to the next policy dialogue on the 30th. Thank you very much.
Oteka basi